Shalom family, this is yet again your boy, Jonathan Hebrew Prince, coming to you on another day, a beautiful day. Shabbat ShaLaWam to all you my brothers and sisters out there seeking truth, trying to get to the bottom of these lies, the bottom of this delusion, killing the illusion, one fact at a time. For this is the day that Hawaii has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. For his love, his patience, his kindness, his strength, his wisdom endures to all generations. Hallel Hawaii, Hallel Hawaii, Hallel Hawaii. What is it this we have on the screen, family? Indian cave. Let's check this out. And look at you. Look at you. Look at you. Sitting right at the top of this beautiful piece of work. Look at you, my copper color people. Well, we African though, right? Indian cave. What do we have here? Let's take a look. It says the Lukians were the Aboriginal Indians who settled in the Turks and Caicos Island over 1,000 years ago. They were exterminated by the Spaniards before 1530, but they have left us many artifacts in these caves. The pottery known as palmito ware was made from red clay, burned and crushed conch shell. The most common vessel shapes were hemispherical bowls and flat griddles. Archaeological excavations in this cave in 1998 uncovered Lukian potsheds and the bones of extinct species of birds, lizards, and tortoises. And look at you. Look at you sitting at the top of this thing, Indian cave, so-called Indian. But what do we have? We have original. It's funny how this thing is copper color. You know, you ask the average individual, you know, their ethnicity, especially when it comes to the so-called black, so-called African-American, so-called Negro. Actually, I had a conversation with a sister regarding this and said, what are you? I'm black. And I looked at it, I said, so your shoes look black, but that skin complexion up on you looking a little lighter than that. A few shades lighter than black. We couldn't get the sister to make the correlation because we so brainwashed. But look at your skin complexion, my copper color sister, my copper color brother. Are you really black? Are you really black? Can you be black? Look at your skin complexion, family. You put that next to a crayon. You put that next to a black boot, black piece of clothing. And I guarantee 98% of you don't look like them shoes. You don't look like that black book sack. You don't look like that black board. You don't look like that black screen or black printer or black hat. You ain't black. You're copper color. Now you'll get you a copper color penny and put it on your skin. And just know copper comes in different shades, but they all copper, right? Put it on your skin and see which one of them coppers match you. But I know it don't. You ain't black. You understand me? Did you hear me? Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? You're not black, family. You're not black. And they're showing you. Look at you. Right here. Right here, family. What else do we have on the screen? Let's see what else we can find right quick. See what else do we have here. See some more images. What is this? To my brothers and sisters in the Caribbean, which is my family. To my Bajans, my Jamaicans. What do we have here? We'll get into this job later on, dealing with the Arawak Indians. Mighty copper colored here. Let's keep going. I like to look through these images a little bit. There was a particular image I really enjoyed that I want to see if I can get to right quick before we get into today's topic. We're almost there, family. What do we have here? We're going to talk about these people right here. The true historical Moors. We're going to deal with them. Let's keep going. We're going to deal with those Moors today. You better believe you me. Who is this brother? Who is this brother right here? Let's keep going. We just talking copper color. We just talking copper color people found here by the European. That's all we talking about. Look at the Arawak tribe of the Bahamas. Look at these. Look at your ancestors' family. The Arawaks. But they want to tell us that we came from Africa. That's the story of it all. We came from Africa. Look at the early paintings of the Caribbeans. Look at this here. We're going to get into some of this drop. We're going to get into some of this information. Why are Native Americans called Indians? What do we have here? Feathers on the head. And we're going to get into this information a little bit more. We're going to get into this. But today's topic is we're coming back to these brothers right here. We're coming back to these Moors. Okay? It's important, my so-called black, my so-called African American, my so-called Negro, to know who you are and to know your orientation, to know where you stand. You're here. You're not in Africa. And these brothers sitting right on this screen will let you know that they're from here. And what did we talk about last week? We talked about the fact in the last video. You got to go check it out. Okay? It's called Not Racism, It's Economics. This will be Not Racism, It's Economics Part 2. Okay? These brothers told you off of their website that they are the descendants of the Moabites. Okay? We know that the Moabites, in accordance with Genesis chapter 19, we know that the Moabites coming from Lot. And what Lot did, a correction with the daughters, both of his daughters did with him, which was got him drunk, had sex with him, and one of them created the Moabites, the other one created the Ammonites. And we know that we wasn't supposed to be dealing with the Moabites. Okay, we also know that this is similar to a family feud, because who was Lot in correlation to Abraham? Lot was Abraham's nephew. Okay, so this is family. Okay, so to say that they were here, of course, especially if we're claiming to be here, which we know, the oldest Hebrew is found here. Oldest artifacts are found here. Oldest pyramids are found over on this side of the hemisphere. So we know this. Though for those of you who don't, please go take a gander. Go take a look at it. Go look it up before you have a debate. Go look it up. Okay? Now these brothers told you last week when we was looking at this video, they told you that it was money. It was economics. When they was being challenged, and we're going to watch a little segment of this video here because we're going to deal with some things. When they was being challenged, asking about the slavery, the slave trade, and how is it that the European was able to conquer so much if they claim to be so great and have taught the so-called modern European all that they know? How was it that we, as a so-called black, so-called African American, so-called Negro, was being able to be placed into captivity, into chattel slavery, the worst slavery of man? How was that even possible? Well, they told you that they made Confederacy with the European. Against who? You. For what? Monetary, economical gain. Why is that important? Hence the title of the video. It's not racism. Racism comes later, family. So when we're watching the news and we see white cop killed black man. And that's being propagated throughout all the news stations, all the Facebook, all the YouTube, okay? Twitter, Instagram, showing all of this black versus white. It is getting us off of the scope of the true problem. Right versus wrong. Righteousness versus unrighteousness. Wicked versus good. That's what we're talking about. But as long as we stay wrapped up in racism, then we will continuously be in perpetual servitude to this entire system, the system itself. Racism is a concept made by man, taught for subjugation, just like religion. Everybody gets caught up in trying to be conscious out of religion, forgetting that that's only one construct of the entire ideal of subjugation as a whole. Religion is just one aspect. You got the bus of religion. You got the bus of racism. You got the bus of all the schisms. If it's a schism, you got to look into that and see where is the hijack. Because these melanated, carbonated, dark-skinned individuals are telling you that their ancestors in recent history made Confederacy with the modern so-called white man European to perpetuate chattel slavery amongst the so-called black, so-called African-American, so-called Negro, and white folks, so-called white folks, for monetary gain, economics. Because you have to ask yourself the question, why would these brothers, these Moors, why would they make Confederacy with a foreign nation against you? Or why would they make let's back it up. Let's look at the timeline. Let's look at the timeline that's being used in mainstream history. Mainstream history states in 1619, the first African slave arrived in Jamestown, Virginia. Now, and from that point on, slavery just went straight hard in the paint. That's what's taught, right? And it's taught as black slave, white slave master, right? That's the entire scope in a nutshell. In accordance with mainstream. I didn't say your own personal research, so please don't debate me on that. If you're doing your own personal research, then we're talking about something totally different. We're talking about conscious study. I'm talking about mainstream public private school teaching that's being propagated to the children that you was grown up in and now still taught that it was black versus white. Black slave, white slave master. Period. Now that's 1619 start. But when you look at these brothers, and these brothers tell you about Confederacy, first of all, when you look at the year that they made the Confederacy, and we're going to go over that, how is it that if slavery was so predominant just amongst the so-called Negro community, was these Negroes able to make some doggone Confederacy with the so-called white man? That don't even make sense. Unless you factor in the fact that it's not particularly about race, but it was about economics. Now, when you factor in economics and you factor in profitability, now we talking. Now we talking how something, even on that convoluted, distorted timeline, can make perfect sense. Because we know slavery didn't start in 1619, because you got to deal with Christopher Colombo that came prior and committed total genocide amongst the island of Hispaniola. You got to deal with that. That's in the 1400s. So we got to back this thing up. Still, that does not even make it a better argument. That actually makes matters worse. That if that happened so far prior to 1619, still, how would these brothers, so-called, able to make Confederacy in the 1700s with the same so-called European that they knew was subjugating the so-called black, so-called African American, so-called Negro. And was it only the so-called black or so-called African American and so-called Negroes? Of course not, because you got to deal with the Slavs, because that's where the word slaves come from, and we know where the Slavics were. We know about this whole, you got to go look into the institution of indentured servitude. How that started out, and then how that ended up. So without further ado, let's take a look at this. First of all, got to come from the scriptures. We're going to come from Tehillim, or Psalms chapter 25, verse 5. Always got to make sure we come from this Tanakh and comprehend on why we study truth. It says what? Lead me in thy truth. He's talking to the Most High, and teach me, for thou art the Elohim of my salvation. On thee do I wait all the day. Now, understand that the Most High is about the truth. He don't fool her with them lies. You feel me? So we got to definitely deal with this truth, okay? So that's why we always searching truth, because we want to be led by his truth, okay? And there's only one kind of truth, substantiated by what? Facts. That's the truth. That's what we dealing with, okay? Not your truth, not my truth, not the system's truth. We want nothing but truth. That's what we want, truth. Right? And for those of you who can't handle the truth, oh well, ain't nothing I can do for you. But this is what it's about. So let's keep going. Let's listen. And we're going to play a little quick snippet. And then we're going to do a little research about it. And then we're going to conclude and then move to part 3 in the future. Let's listen.
So-called Native Americans that fought on the side of Confederacy, because in 1868, 66, they didn't want to give up their slaves, so they was on the side of Confederacy. So this concept that we have, that it was like all these Europeans that was on the side of Confederacy fighting to keep slavery going. There were many indigenous original people on the side of Confederacy, so-called blacks as well as Native Americans, fighting to keep slavery going on. And the reason we wear the American banner, because we gotta understand that we had a confederacy called the Iroquois Confederation, which was so-called blacks, Moors, and that we united with the Europeans to form a union. It was 35 more than 20 Europeans, and we formed a union. And the white stripes represent, the stripes represent the 6 European tribes that came here, and the red represent that we was the minority to form the union we call United States of America, because the Constitution was adopted from the Great Law of Peace.
So are you saying that the Moors fought on the side of the South to keep slavery going?
It was Moors that fought on the North as well as the South. It was Moors that fought on the South and the North that fought. Some fought against slavery, some fought for slavery.
So you're saying that the Moors in this country were not united?
No, we was not united. It was just like today we're not united. Some Moors wanted to fight and keep slavery going. Some Moors didn't want to keep slavery going. So when you read about the American Revolution, it says it was brother fighting against brother. That's talking about the Moors fighting against each other. And Abraham...
Brutish Moors?
Yeah.
That's what the British Moors.
Exactly, because you had a people called the Ethiopian regiment who fought on the side of the British, who were free during the time of the American Revolution. There's a book called They Were White, They Were Slaves. Go into that history that they were so-called blacks Moors who fought on the side of Britain during that time. And you gotta understand too, when the Europeans came and emancipated from Britain, Britain was with treaties with the Moors. The Britain was paying a tax to the Moors. So when they was freeing independence from Britain, they was freeing from the Moors. And they came over here, and some of our Moors didn't agree to form a union with them. It was 35 more than 20 European sons that formed a union. It was supposed to have been 50 of them. There's a book called Indian Givers that go into that. The rest of the Moors didn't agree to form the union, and the 35 Moors agreed and formed the union. That's when we start having these different tribal wars amongst each other. The Moors, we never was defeated by the Europeans. We defeated ourselves because we had disagreements with one another. But
did you hear that? Did you hear that, family? Now, I'm going to back this up because we're going to have to take this little by little, because there's so much substance in this video that is absolutely astonishing, okay? We're going to back up just a little bit, and we're going to re-listen and deal with the part of this segment that we're going to research together. Let's listen one more time.
Slave trade took place. You had so-called Native Americans that fought on the side of Confederacy because in 1868, 66, they didn't want to give up their slaves. So they
1800s, y'all. 1868 did not want to give up their slave. Let's keep going.
The far side of Confederacy. So this concept that we have, that it was like all these Europeans that was on the side of Confederacy fighting to keep slavery going. There were many indigenous original people on the side of Confederacy, so-called blacks as well as Native Americans, fighting to keep slavery going on.
Did you hear that? Okay, there was many. He didn't say some. He didn't say a little bit. He didn't say a fraction. He said there was many indigenous aboriginals, so-called Native Americans, fighting on the side of the South to keep slavery intact, to keep slavery going, to keep it moving. Okay, let's keep going.
And the reason we wear the American banner, because we gotta understand that we had a confederacy called the Iroquois Confederation.
We about to deal with that. Let's keep going.
Was so-called blacks, Moors, and that we united with the Europeans to form a union. It was 35 more than 20 Europeans, and we formed a union. And the white stripes represent, the stripes represent the 6 European tribes that came here, and it represent that we was the minority to form the union we call the United States of America, because the Constitution was adopted from the Great Law of Peace.
The Constitution of the United States of America, our current Constitution, family, comes from the Great Law of Peace. We're gonna deal with this, okay? Let's take a gander. Bang! Let's take a look at it. The Six Nations Confederacy during the American Revolution, compiled by Park Roger William Sawyer. Now, I want to throw this out here: fair use. Fair use. I like the way my brother Con Drop says, fair use in your caboose. Fair use in your caboose. It's not my work. Okay, I'm definitely gonna give the author of this right here all their credit. I'm just simply using this as a teaching point and for scholarship, and I'm throwing it out there over the waves so that nobody can charge me with copyright. Cause I ain't infringing on nobody. I don't make no money for this. I just love history. I love research. I love the Most High, who loves truth. Let's keep going. Now, it says the 5 nations comprise. Oh, by the way, I'm going to tear these names up, so let's go. The 5 nations comprise of the Sensia, the Cayuga, the Onondaga, the one that, man, you see it on the screen, and the Mohawk, united in confederation about the year AD 1200. So these five nations, indigenous nations, came together and formed a confederation at AD 1200. It says this unification took place under the Great Tree of Peace, and each nation gave its pledge not to war with other members of the confederation. Around 1720, so now this is 520 years later, the Tuscarora Nation was admitted into the league as the 6th member. Okay, Confederacy members refer to themselves as that right there. I'm gonna take again. Let me try this. It's the Haudenosaunee. For those of you that can pronounce it better, good on you. Which translates to, quote, the people of the Longhouse, end quote. They saw the Confederacy as a symbolic version of their traditional Longhouse dwellings, stretching across most of what is today New York State. The Mohawks were the guardians of the eastern door in the lower Mohawk Valley area. The Onondagas occupied the upper Mohawk Valley and the area of modern-day Undina, New York. The Indianas, something like that, were the keepers of the council fire in the center of the Longhouse in the modern-day Greater Syracuse area. The Cayugas occupied the Finger Lakes areas, and the Sensia were the guardians of the western door in the modern Rochester, Buffalo, New York area. So now you see where they are. Through a matriarchal hierarchy and a men's council, the 6 nations employed great executive ability in governing themselves and other nations. Situated upon the headwaters of Ohio, Hudson, Delaware, Susquehanna, the Chenango, Mohawk, and St. Louis rivers, the 6 nations held within their jurisdiction the passageway to the interior of the continent. and could easily travel in any direction. The military successes of the Six Nations left them in a strategically strong position. They traveled far beyond their own borders. First, this is the problem number one. Listen to what it says. They traveled far beyond their own borders, conquering many Indian nations, making them tributary nations. Wrong already. Just wasn't enough to have their own. They're going beyond. Okay? Now, keep in mind, we're talking about these Moors. Okay? Let's keep going. At one time, their domain reached north to the Sorrel River in Canada, south to the Carolinas, west to the Mississippi, and east to the Atlantic. The Six Nations were easily the dominant Indian Confederacy in the northeast and northwest areas of America. Okay? So these were some conquering, this was a conquering nation. Confederacy. Six nations together, tearing it up. Okay, let's keep going. As I like to say, it gets gooder. Okay, so let's go. Now we're gonna watch foolishness number 2. The arrival of Europeans in their lands offered the Six Nations new opportunity of expanding their influence by becoming a dominant force in the fur trade industry. Did you get that? Maybe saying, why is he hollering and tripping? I'm going to tell you why I'm hollering and tripping. I'm hot. I'm hot because when I look at the history, keep in mind, all life been taught, black versus white, black versus white, black versus white. Okay? That's what we taught. Oh, the white man is the one that told my back up, and he did this and he did that. May be true. But what the problem is it wasn't done without help. And we gonna see this. Now, the Europeans, keep in mind, look what we talking about. Let's keep going. Watch this. Check it out. It says, initially, their main trading partners were the Dutch, which then changed to English after the Dutch ceded their land claims in America to England in 1660. My brothers and sisters, according to the botched up garbage timeline that they teach, slavery started when? I'm not talking to you independent scholar researchers of truth. I'm just saying, step outside there for a minute and let's go to the convoluted, distorted, whacked out timeline that they told us. When did slavery supposedly have started according to mainstream media? 1619. How these cats was making this kind of arrangement with the English in 1660? Now, coming into the independent study, we know slavery came prior to this. We know that. We talking 1400s. We talking the dumb diverses. We talking about the Edict of the Pope. That's what we talking about, right? Again, this still 1660. That's after that. How that's happening? When everybody black, so-called, supposed to be in chains and singing Negro spirituals on a plantation. That's what they teach everybody. All the people that's of carbonation and melanation was getting destroyed by the so-called white man. What I'm looking here though is I'm looking at indigenous people. I'm looking at these brothers' ancestors, these so-called brothers' ancestors right here, Six Nations. Not only are they conquering other so-called Indian tribes, other copper-colored tribes, then they turn around and see that the European comes through onto this land and say, you know what? This looks like some new opportunity for me to expand my commerce in the fur trading industry. Industry. What is that? Economics, family. Wasn't worried about you. Talking about economics. We talking about money. We talking about richness. We talking about conquering. We talking about land at whosever expense. get your head up out the gutter and hear what I'm saying. You got to realize this stuff right here. It's not about necessarily racism. Again, that's a later concept because you're looking at economics right now, family. Let's keep it moving. Remember, this is 1660. The Confederacy relationship with France was not admissible, as France had initially aligned themselves with the Abenaki, longtime foes of the nations. Six Nations / you see the / French relationships seesawed back and forth between periods of peace and violence. With the coming French and Indian War in 1755, both France and England actively worked to gain slaves. Wait, I'm sorry, I read that wrong. It actively worked to gain the Six Nations as allies. How you working to gain Six Nations allies if all these copper-colored Negroes supposed to be slaves? Oh, that's right, they weren't. Were they? They were conquering people. That's what they were. Conquering people in France and England in 1755. Coming up to that war was seeking actively, as they put in this article, work to gain Six Nations, these Six Nations as allies. Let's keep going. While the French had some initial success, particularly among the Sensia, the Six Nations ultimately became allies of the English. Didn't these brothers, so-called, just say that? Didn't they just say that? That they had treaties, Confederacy rather, don't want to misquote, Confederacy with the doggone English, with the British. Now you're reading it. Fact checking. Check. True checks. Let's keep going. This allegiance was won largely through the work of one man, Sir William Johnson. Johnson was a poor Irish immigrant, who had built an empire in the Mohawk Valley through his dealings with the Indians. He immersed himself in the Indian culture. What? How do you immerse yourself if you're a slave master? How do you immerse yourself if you're supposed to be looking like if you're supposed to look like the enemy? Huh? Let's keep going. I'm sorry, I'm animated dick, and I feel crazy about this right now. It's some crazy foolishness I'm reading right here. Let's keep going. And as a result of this, he was ultimately adopted into the... Adopted? These Mohawks adopted this fool? Who is this dude, man? Let's look. In 1760, at only 18 years of age, John Johnson, son of Sir William Johnson, became captain of a company of the Tyrone Country militia. While studying in England, Johnson had his father's hereditary title confirmed by King George III, and he was knighted Sir John Johnson in 1765. When his father died in 1774, Johnson also became Major General of the Tyrone County Militia. With the coming of the American Revolution, however, he was forced to flee to Canada in 1776. Huh? You mean the same year as the Declaration of Independence? Okay, to avoid being arrested. His crime was being a loyalist in Patriot territory. Patriots also feared Johnson would use his strong influence to rally both loyalists and members of the Six Nations Indian Confederacy to the British cause. Wow. Let's go back. Let's go. Johnson even became superintendent of the Indian Affairs. What? Superintendent of Indian Affairs for a majority of the 13 colonies in Canada. Throughout his life, he was a trusted friend, mediator, and this dude was an advisor to the Six Nations. Let's go. The English / Six Nation Alliance helped to facilitate the building of Fort Stanwix in 1758 on traditionally Oneida land. As British allies, the Confederacy gave a measure of safety to English frontier settlements in New York and aided the British on many of their expeditions against the French, which ultimately led the English victory over the French. So this cat, this one right here, because he like do a whole bunch of talking. This one right here, this cat told you why you was getting your behind toned smooth up in slavery, while our people was chattel slavery. They over here making treaties and I keep saying treaties, making confederacies with these cats, building stuff, taking in Sir William Johnson. That's what these cats was doing. Let's take a look at them again. Let's look at them. These are your descendants, the brothers with the feds. Let's keep going. Where we at? Now we getting into some goodies right here. It says the peace that came with the end of the French and Indian War was short-lived, however, as colonists pushed further into Indian lands. In an effort to stem further bloodshed, English, colonial, and Six Nation leaders met at Fort Stanwix. You mean the one that they built in 58? So they met in Fort Stanwix in 1768, to establish firm boundary lines. This, quote, boundary line treaty, end quote, signed between England and the Six Nations. Oh, but it gets good. Let's keep going. Who were also signing for the Shawnee, Delawares, Mingos, and others, both with and without their consent. So these brothers, so-called, got together with England, went to Fort Stanwix, signed the treaty, and didn't even have everybody else's permission. Let's take a look at it. Let's take a look. Move back. Establish a firm line between Indian and European lands. In the end, however, the treaty did very little to stop the flood of settlement into Indian lands. In other words, that treaty was totally disrespected. Let's keep going. The coming of the war between England and her colonies brought new problems and concerns for the Six Nation Confederacy. They did not fully understand why the English were quarreling with one another and had no desire to be drawn into what they perceived as a civil war. Early in the revolution, Onondaga's leaders sent a message to the governor of New York stating, "We are unwilling to join either side of such a contest, for we love you both, Old England and New. Should the great King of England apply us for aid, we should deny him. And should the colonies apply, we shall refuse. We Indians cannot find or recollect from the traditions of our ancestors any like case." Let's keep going. Let's keep going. The neutral course could not be maintained for long. However, as pressure increased from both England and the 13 states, the English particularly were insistent with the Confederacy until its obligations as allies of England. In the end, the Civil War aspects of the American Revolution spilled over into the Six Nations. Unable to agree on a unified course of action, the Confederacy split. So now, since they being pressured from both of the England and the 13 colonies, new and old, these brothers couldn't even keep it together. Remember, he said they were split, right? Of course, he was talking about the Civil War, but they was not united, right, at all. So these cats split. And what happened to the split? It says, in the end, the Civil War aspects of the American Revolution spilled over to the colonies. The Confederacy split, with not only nation fighting nation, but individuals within each nation taking different sides. Due to the old alliances and the beliefs that they stood a better chance of keeping their lands under the English, the majority of the nation supported England in some form or another. Only the Oneida and Tuscarora gave major support to the Americas. So you got some fighting for the Americas, So I'm fighting for the English. Let's keep going. The Confederacy members supporting the English, such as Joseph and Molly Bratt, helped their allies launch numerous devastating raids throughout the war on the frontier settlements of New York and Pennsylvania. The Oneida and Tuscarora gave valuable services to the Americans as scouts and guides, and even supplied men in the Continental Army for a short time. Both sides raided and destroyed each other's villages. That's how foolish it got. Let's keep going. The Treaty of Paris brought the war to an end in 1783. In this treaty, however, neither the English nor Americans had made provisions for their Six Nation allies. Go figure. The Confederacy was forced to sign a separate treaty with the United States in 1784. This treaty was negotiated and signed at the ruinous Fort Stanwix. It's funny how they just keep signing at the same place, nothing good come from it, and resulted in the English Allied Confederacy members giving up significant amounts of their traditional lands. Didn't that dude say that? He said they defeated themselves. Let's keep going. In the end, it was no more binding than the 1768 treaty had been. Remember, they signed at Fort Stanwix before. That didn't mean anything. The Oneida and Tuscarora would receive little weight in compensation for their support of the United States. The end of the Revolutionary War brought peace, but no victory to the Haudenosaunee on either side. The war left their Confederacy in culture shattered and their lands and villages devastated and destroyed. While time and fortune has helped, many wounds from that time have yet to heal. That's what we're talking about here, family. Okay? These cats got together, Six Nations, okay, got together and decided that they was going to do what? They was going to, first of all, conquer other Indian tribes. Then after they conquered the other Indian tribes along as far as west Mississippi, all the way up from New York, all the way down into the Carolinas, then they saw the Europeans coming over and say, hey, we gonna make sure that we keep in mind, all this stuff is happening while at the same time, so it's slavery. Slavery is happening at the same time. So when the brother that's disputing these individuals saying, hey, I'm trying to understand this timeline you have going on regarding your role in slavery. And then if we saw in the last video that this dude said it was just about economics. Because he kept saying what? He kept saying that they didn't want slavery to continue. They never said that they didn't want slavery to start. He just kept saying they didn't want slavery. The ones that fought on the North did not want slavery to continue at that time. I mean, they called it conscious. They called it conscious at that time. But as you watch later on in this video, you'll find out that what? You'll find out that they stood aside while they was trying to get fur commerce with the European and all the whole other bunch of trade and stuff that they were signing with the so-called modern day European so-called white man. You'll find out that these brothers right here, these Moors, was making some money, some riches, and a hefty sum off of chattel slavery. Let's deal with the next thing he talked about. Where is it? And make sure I get the reference. Barbara Graymount. This is the source. Barbara Graymount. Remember he said about the Iroquois Confederation? This is the Iroquois Confederation. This is what we're talking about right here. Okay? How do we know that? Let's go to the reference. The Iroquois in the American Revolution. Syracuse University Press, 1972. Indians at Fort Stanwix. Research article for the NPS. Fort Stanwix NM Garrison Training Manual. That's what we're dealing with in this article, brothers and sisters. My copper color people. That's what we're dealing with. The Six Nations Confederacy. Let's keep going. See if they have it in this article right here as well. Give me a quick second. Take a quick look. Look at Sir William Johnson from 1715 to 1774. So this right here is Sir John Johnson, the son of this person. This the one. My bad, family. This the one I wanted to get at you right quick. Look what it says. 6 nations, particularly the Mohawks, right? Let's look at him right quick on how well they received this cat. Where was it? I thought it was real good. Let's just read it. Johnson came from Ireland to America in the 1740s to manage his uncle's Montauk Valley estate. A very enterprising man, Johnson was quick to grasp the possibilities that existed for accumulating wealth and the land in the valley. Along with overseeing his uncle's business affairs, he soon had his own trading business with the Indians. Check that out. He was one of the few Englishmen to understand the benefits of assimilating Indian culture into his political and business dealings with them. This helped give Johnson more credibility with the Indians. His greatest influence would always be with the 6 nations, particularly the Mohawks. Johnson was eventually adopted into Mohawk Nation and took Molly Brant, a Mohawk clan mother, as his second wife in a common law marriage. And from that, you get this cat. Little bitty Benson. Let's keep going. The U.S. Constitution and the Great Law of Peace. July 1st, 2014 by Molly Larkin. Fair use. Here we go. The history of the U.S. Constitution. We weren't taught in school. First published here in 2012. Has turned out to be one of my most popular posts. I thought a repeat this holiday would be appropriate. Only the title of the post has changed. Like me, I learned in grade school that the U.S. Constitution was based on ancient Greek democracy, which was a creative stretch of the truth since ancient Greece was not a democracy. My research as to what children are taught today about the origin of our government is also disappointing, although there are some states that have updated the teachings to include Native American influence. Apparently, the founding fathers simply created it out of thin air or were influenced by European governments, even though there was no democracy anywhere in Europe at the time. So now we're going to get into what? The true history of the U.S. Constitution. Let's read. The truth is that the U.S. Constitution is modeled in both principle and form of the great law of peace of the American Indian tribe known as the Iroquois. Interesting, isn't it? Well, how did they get that information to even make an entire constitution off of these individuals? Right? What are we talking about? We're talking about the great law of peace. The one that this brother here, the one that like to do all this talking, nice glasses though, the one that this brother right here, that's what he said. He said the Constitution made up off what? The great law of peace. Let's read it. It says, this is absolutely unequivocal historical fact. While there may have been other influences, when compared side by side, the influence of the great law of peace is irrefutable. In 1987, the United States Senate acknowledged that the great law of peace of the Iroquois nations served as a model for the Constitution of the United States. And this is the reference. I'm not reading on them letters, but you can see it, don't you? I'm just playing. It says USS Congress 76 to December 1987, and it has a parenthesis at the end and a period. Let's keep going. And since the U.S. Constitution was a model of the Charter of the United Nations, the Iroquois Great Law of Peace is also a basis of international law. Wow. When the founding fathers looked for examples of effective government and human liberty upon which to model a constitution to unite the 13 colonies, they found it in the government of the Iroquois nation. In the 18th century, the Iroquois League was the oldest, most highly evolved participatory democracy on earth. I find it sad that the true history is still not taught now in all of our schools, although some do. But here it is, the peacemaker of the great law of peace. I don't know what this is here. They tried. Anyway, let's keep going. In the 12th century, 5 tribes. Don't that sound familiar? Did we read something about that? Let's look at it. In the 12th century, 5 tribes in what is now the northeastern U.S. were constantly at war. The Mohawks, Sincere, right? Who is this? This is the Onetta, the Onondaga, and Sayugas. I'm tearing this up, and I'm loving it. The wars were vicious and, according to tribal history, included cannibalism. So they got a little more history. They was fighting. One day it could. This is beautiful. One day a canoe made of white stones carried a man, both born of a virgin, across Onondaga Lake to announce the good news of peace had to come and the killing of violence would end. He traveled from tribe to tribe over the course of years, preaching peace because peace was the desire of the Creator. Oral tribal history says it may have taken him 40 years to reach everyone and get agreement from all 5 tribes. And we talking about the same 5 tribes that's a part of this right here. Let's keep going. Okay? It says this man became known as the peacemaker. Eventually, the 5 tribes agreed to the great law of peace and became known collectively as the Haudenosaunee, which means people of the Long House. Outsiders refer to them as the Iroquois. In 1722, Tuscarora joined the Confederacy. So today it's known as the 6 tribes of the what? The Iroquois Confederacy. The same thing. I told you it's going to come, family. The same thing that we just read. The Iroquois. So the 6 nations was who? The Iroquois Confederacy. Let's keep going. The Great Law of Peace was a vehicle for creating harmony, unity, and respect among human beings. Its recognition of individual liberty and justice surpasses that of many democracies. I'm tripping. Let's keep going. The Great Law of Peace includes freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the right of women to participate in government, separation of powers, checks and balances within government, a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, 3 branches of government, 2 houses and the Grand Council, a Women's Council, which is the Iroquois equivalent of the Supreme Court, settling disputes and judging legal violations. The central idea underlining Iroquois political philosophy is that peace is the will of the Creator and the ultimate spiritual goal and natural order among humans. Dodge all this hijack right here. The founding fathers' consolation with the Iroquois. Okay? What does it say? It says for decades, the Iroquois had urged the English colonists to unite together as one independent and free people. If this is a lie, this author told it. I'm reading the screen. So now we getting into deeper information where it says the Iroquois not only wanted to trade and open up commerce and trade and the fur trade like we read in the last article, they urged the English colonists to come together and unite and be one independent and free people. Wow. Let's keep going. George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, and Thomas Jefferson met frequently with the Iroquois and made themselves very familiar with the Great Law of Peace. What? You trying to tell me George Washington, we know he owned slaves. We know Jefferson owned slaves. And if I'm not mistaken, Ben Frank, don't quote me, but I think he had a few of his own. You telling me the Iroquois was meeting with these cats? Their ancestors, who they claiming it. The Iroquois Confederation with the 6 tribes of the European nations who recognizes this and that. You telling me they meeting with these cats? They meeting with these cats? George Washington, Ben Franklin, and Thomas Jefferson? Come on, man. Again, I didn't write none of this. I don't take credit for none of this. I'm just reading to you. Washington expressed great excitement over the two houses in Grand Council. Several delegates from the Iroquois Confederacy attended the Continental Congress in 1776 as it wrote the Declaration of Independence and drafted the Constitution of the United States modeled on Iroquois Constitution. Now that's some history you don't learn in nobody's school. At least no public school I'm aware of. I ain't been to all of them. But I'll tell you one thing. You go ask the average person not coming out of public school, even some of these little private schools. Hey, you know about the Iroquois Confederation or what? About the Continental Congress in 1776? Because you understand, when did Washington become a president? Go look it up. Go check it out. Pause the vid. Go check it out. When did this dude become president of the United States? Because we got this little thing called the Continental Congress. And these cats, not only did the ancestors of these cats was problematic amongst our own so-called own people, right? But also, you talking about the fact that they meeting with these cats, and then they go visit. They attend the Continental Congress in 1776 when they was writing a Declaration of Independence and drafting the Constitution of the United States. Again, family, nothing can happen within our nation and people without the help of the insiders. That's what this whole video about, family. I've been hollering and screaming and acting a fool on this mic because sometimes you gotta act a fool and laugh to save from crying when you reading some of this stuff. Some of this stuff hurt. I ain't lying. Forgive me for a quick second, but some of this stuff just straight up hurt. When you got cats up here trying to convince you to be a doggone Moor. Sitting up there trying to tell you about being a Moor, but when you go do the research, you find out the Moors are the one that sold you down the river, sold you down the drain, the one that got your babies caught up as gator bait, got your backs whipped, your women raped, your homes fatherless. When you realize those that look like you part of it, it's upsetting. It's alarming. When all that's been played to you is a so-called white man game. And you realize that your own family members, the nephew of Abraham and his children, his descendants, got you hemmed up. Where they attending the Continental Congress in 1776, the drafting of the Declaration of Independence, in the drafting of the doggone Constitution of the United States of this so-called America. You talking about these cats was there. I gotta act crazy, because if I don't, I'll be crying on this mic. We talk about racism. It's tribalism. It's commerce. It's economics. Follow that dollar. It'll get you the answers you need. Let's keep going. 3 weeks later, the Declaration of Independence was signed and the United States of America was born. That means these cats had a hand. These cats right here had a hand. Their ancestors. They claimed it. I didn't claim it. I don't even know these cats. They claiming this. The Iroquois Confederation. They claiming that they come from the Great Law the Great Law of Peace was helped out with this government, and we reading it, and they claiming it. The brothers with the feds, the Moors. That's why it's important for you to know where you from. Step up out of Africa. You ain't in Africa. That Africa ain't got nothing to do with you. And so when they brought you over there to cultivate the land, they called it the Negro land. That's about all they got to do with you. You here. And while you all over there trying to be Afrocentric, they over here telling you where they from and how the whole place got established and how you wound up in slavery. And how they help. Real spill. This is what it is. Now let's see what got left out the Constitution. What got left out of the U.S. Constitution? In fact, just about the only parts of the Great Law of Peace that our founding fathers, our not being us, our being this author's fathers, didn't incorporate were these. The 7-generation principle, the Constitution of the era called Confederacy states that chiefs consider the impact of their decisions on 7 generations into the future. And the role of women. Clan mothers chose candidates who are male as secoms, political leaders. The women maintain ownership of the land and homes and exercise veto power over any council action that may result in war. The woman can also impeach and expel any leader who conducts himself improperly or loses the confidence of an electorate. Then the woman choose a new leader. Imagine how different our world would be today if the government had included these principles from the start. Now, let's go into these symbols, because it, like I said, it just keeps getting good. The peacemaker designated the tree of peace as a symbol of the great law of peace. A great white pine tree whose branches spread out to shelter all nations who commit themselves to peace. Beneath the tree, the 5 nations buried their weapons of war. Atop the tree is the eagle family, the eagle that sees far. There is a bundle of 5 arrows tied together to represent strength of 5 tribes bound together in peace. 4 long roots stretched out in the 4 sacred directions, the white roots of peace. Thomas Jefferson adopted the symbols of the peacemaker legend. The tree of peace became the Liberty Tree displayed on colonial flags. Eagle that sees far became the American eagle, still a symbol of American government. On the U.S. Great Seal, the American eagle clutches a bundle of 13 arrows representing the original colonies. Our eagle also holds an olive branch, symbolizing that the United States of America has a strong desire for peace, but would always be ready for war. Let's keep going. There's separate leaders for war and peace. There's no separation of church and state in Iroquois society. Spirituality lies at the root of government and law. However, the Iroquois Confederacy, as with most tribes, has separate leaders for war and peace. As a lawmaker, the Shechem could not go to war in his official capacity as Shechem. It disposed to take the war path. If disposed to take the war path, he laid aside his civil office for the time being and became a common warrior. The colonists followed this model too. The inability to separate the civil government and military has doomed many imitators of American democracy, particularly in Africa and Latin America. The 3 principles of the Great Law of Peace. Number 1, righteousness, meaning people must treat each other fairly. Each individual must have a strong sense of justice, must treat people as equals, and must enjoy equal protection under the great law. Number 2, health. Health means that the soundness of mind, body, and spirit will create a strong individual. Health is also the peacefulness that results with a strong mind, uses its rational power to promote well-being between peoples, between nations. Number 3, power. The laws of the great law provide authority, tradition, and stability if properly respected in thought and action. Power comes from the united actions of the people operating under one law with one mind, one heart, and one body. Such power can assure that justice and healthfulness continue. People and nations need to exercise just enough power to maintain the peace and well-being of members of the Confederacy. It's the omission of these 3 principles, the 7 generations rule, and the role of women that caused Native Americans today to say that United States government copied the Great Law of Peace but didn't really understand it. So our or her or their forefathers copied the great law of a people whose land they stole, and against whom the government committed genocide, and then kept it a secret for 200 years. And this is her stuff. Says, it just makes me want to cry. Please teach your children the truth of the history of our great country. If you enjoyed this post, I'll be thrilled if you check one of the buttons. This is Molly Larkin, co-author of the international bestseller, The Wind Is My Mother, The Life and Teachings of a Native American Shaman. She is passionate about helping people live life to their fullest potential through her classes and blog at this right here. There you go, family. Now you know what we just broke down a little bit about what these brothers said. The Iroquois Confederation. We know about the 6 nations who made up the Iroquois Confederation, stemming from 1200 AD, so-called 1200 AD, to the coming of 1720, I believe, is when the other nations joined. Let's do that. Yep, 1720, when the other nations joined. We go into the fact that they was conquering all other Indian tribes. They expanded their territory because they traveled far beyond their own borders, conquering many Indian nations, making them tributary nations. Okay, we know that they fooled up with the English. They were, the arrival of the Europeans. Right, we know that they fooled up with the English. We know in this particular war right here, they fought on the side of England. But then later on in the article, we see how their entire situation got botched up, tore up, and destroyed. Family, I hope that this is some edification for you today. Lead me in thy truth and teach me, for thou art my Elohim and my salvation. On thee do I wait all the day. I hope that this has shown favor on your spirit this day. I'm gonna have these links below. Go check out Go check out the video. Go do your own research and understand one thing: understand and overstand. Get up out that race situation, that race baiting that they doing out here, and learn the truth behind the matter. Just because they look like you, and just because folk talk like you, remember, everyone with the same skin ain't kin. Much ado to your family. ShaLaWam.